couple of things to talk about this week. The first one is Bill 9 in Ontario, aimed at giving municipal councils and provincial authorities the power to remove forcibly councillors who behave egregiously. Think Rick Shirelli. Took forever to get him off council, even after several women came out with very credible, and it turns out true, allegations of misconduct of a sexual nature. And, there's a case to be made for saying that this bill does not go far enough. For instance, one of the conditions for someone to be removed from council is that the rest of council has to vote unanimously to remove that person. And some people think that this is too high a bar to clear. And I sympathize with that a lot. And I'm not here to say that it should be, more difficult to remove people from council. But the problem with these bills essentially is that you can't legislate character. When you're faced with a councillor who is so shameless that even after it is demonstrated true that they have misbehaved in ways that are clearly unacceptable, and they insist on keeping their job, processes is not what's going to save us in this case. In fact, I would argue it actually makes it easier for those people to make that process, drag it out, take years and years of processes and appeals and this and that and the other thing, and then you just wind up with lawyers getting rich on this, and not much more direct accountability for people. I don't know what the answer is, and maybe this is worth trying, but I don't think that this is the answer. I think the answer is in character, and then the rest of us demanding loudly. Tarring and feathering is perhaps that's too strong because, that's actually physically dangerous to people. But metaphorically speaking, if we were to start tarring and feathering people who misbehave that way and make it impossible for them to be at council, for instance, what if the other councillors decided to turn their back on that councillor and said, we're not going to do business at council until you leave? Maybe something like that would help. Anyway, I don't think Bill 9 is the answer. There were hearings on that here in Ottawa today, recording this on July 17th on the Thursday. We'll see where this goes. Again, my bottom line is you cannot legislate character, and that's unfortunate. Federally speaking, we're looking at apparently, the August 1st deadline for the trade negotiations, if that's still the deadline, who knows. It's not looking too great, and I think people who are more expert in this than I am, just not saying much, will tell you that, trade deals take a long time. You can't just, even if you agree on everything, it still takes a long time to make sure that all the mechanisms are in place and that you have all the data and blah, 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 and that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So whether or not we can have any hope of having anything in place, even a memorandum of understanding by August 1st, and then that's not even asking ourselves whether or not the U.S. president would actually respect a trade deal that he himself signed. So I think that the Liberals are starting to manage expectations that way, or try to lower expectations so that, Canadians voted for this party, this guy in particular, because he was the one best suited or best qualified, I think most people thought, to deal with this business, with this erratic and, toddlerish president. I don't think this job is actually feasible. I think most people are going to come to that realization. Will that cost the Carney government, a lot of points? We'll see. I think most people are reasonable enough to recognize that this is not actually a job that can be done. And that's saying nothing about the whole Epstein thing. Like I've said elsewhere, I don't like conspiracies, and I don't like talk about this anyway because it's very gross. But the people who put Donald Trump in power, to them, and I'm pleased at least that there is a line that they will not cross, but the Epstein thing is sticking. And I think it's going to hurt him very badly, and not a moment too soon. So I'm just grabbing my popcorn and trying to see, how far I can watch this without having to go take a shower. But I wanted to say something about the way that the Liberals under Mark Carney are going about trying to reduce the size of the government by asking departments and outfits like Via Rail, for instance, and CBC to say, you guys come up with your suggestions for how you would reduce your budget by a certain target. And I think that that's a decent enough way to proceed. I think that having those arbitrary, because like everyone must cut, this much or so many jobs or this and that, I don't know that that's necessarily helpful. And neither is the position where, some people will say, well, we can't cut anywhere because we're already here. I think most people who are not in the public service, and that's the majority of Canadians, agree that there's certainly some savings to be made everywhere, including there. And I would think that a certain percentage of the public service themselves, they also agree that there's some, not necessarily waste, but there are ways that could be more efficient to do this. And so far, I like the tone of the government that says, it's not coming in like a bunch of savages with chainsaws. Like, this isn't Elon Musk in the Oval Office coming in to cut savagely. But at the same time, I think everybody understands that they're serious. And yeah, changes are coming, and people have an opportunity to propose changes that they think would make the most sense for their outfits and their mission. And I think that's proceeding pretty much like grown-ups. Not perfect, I'm sure. Like, I'm looking at this from the 30,000 feet view, and so I'm sure that if I got a little closer, I would see a whole bunch of things that could be done better. But I think that by and large, that's probably a good enough approach. And here's where I think it is brilliant, though. It's not so much for the substance of it, it's for the politics of it. Because cutting in the size of the government is something that a lot of the voters, if not most voters, if not all voters of the Conservative Party at the last election agreed was a priority. And so by going into that space first, it's at the moment, I would say that it's almost taking the number one spot above trade negotiations as the most important thing that's happening right now as far as the federal government. And I think that is quietly and underhandedly removing any appeal for anybody to say that, you know what, Pierre Poilievre would be a better prime minister. I mean, already in all the opinion polls, you see that, in the question of who do you trust more to be prime minister right now in these circumstances, I think Mark Carney has something like a 30-point advantage over Pierre Poilievre. This one is already kind of settled, but the way that they're going about it by insisting that cuts be made anyway, it furthers, it deepens that I'm mixing my metaphors, but anyway, it makes it even less probable for Pierre Poilievre to have anything he can criticize the Carney government for, because criticizing on Donald Trump, that's hard, because most people understand that this is, it's a very special situation. And then criticizing him for what? Not going deep enough into cuts, not going well enough into cuts. Like, he just sounds like a whiny, little guy. And that's not appealing, and nobody really wants that. And speaking of whiny, so the longest ballot committee, I call them terminally unfunny yahoos myself. Like, these people are a pain in the butt. Wanting to have 200 candidates on the ballot for the by-election in Battle River, Crowfoot, where Pierre Poilievre is trying to get a seat to come back in the House of Commons. I don't think they're funny. I don't think they're doing the right thing. I know they have a goal that they're trying to get support for reviewing and updating and improving the electoral system. And that's fair enough. I mean, I've spoken with the person in charge of that group, and I said, can you point to me the way that what you're doing now actually helps bring about the right kind of electoral reform? And I mean, he said words, but didn't convince me one bit. Like, this is just so annoying what they're doing, and it's punishing the wrong people. But anyway, in Carleton, back on April 28th, there were 91 candidates total on the ballot. And that cost everybody a long time a lot of delays, because Elections Canada staff had to go through these meter-long ballots to try and make sure that they had the right winner at the end. And we didn't get results in that writing until 5 a.m. I remember I was waiting for them. This time, if they're putting 200 people on the ballots, that's more than twice what there was in Carleton in April. Sorry, that's going to be a pain in the ass to count. And so Pierre Poilievre was in the news this week whining, seriously, he has to stop whining because that's really not good, that this was a scam and that we needed rules to prevent this from happening. Now, I agree with him on the second one, that finding a way to stop this nonsense, good idea. Perhaps one good suggestion, that's one that Pierre Poilievre had, was to say that only one person, like a person who's an official agent for a candidate, can only be official agent for one person. At the moment, there's a bit of a loophole in the Elections Canada law that someone can be official agent for any number of candidates, and you don't need that many signatures, or you don't need a deposit. It's very easy to put yourself up as a candidate for election federally, making it a little bit harder, for instance, by making sure that each candidate had a different person signing their ballot, being an official agent. I think that would put an end to this. Or maybe you could say you could sign 5 maximum, and that's it. So really that would get in the way of the longest ballot committee nonsense. And that's a great idea. But to go and call their movement and what they're trying to do, which again, it's pretty pointless as far as I'm concerned, but to call this a scam, makes it look like he's afraid of losing. And on that note, and I just want to say that, oh, by the way, this, as I wrote in this, like, it's available now on indigo.ca, and it's also available in a number of independent bookstores across Ottawa, on Amazon, and soon in Indigo bookstores. But one of the things I document in this, in how Bruce Vanjoy took away the writing of Carleton, is, there was no magic solution. What he did was to go door to door, talk to his neighbors over 2 years, talk to thousands and thousands of people in his riding, and really had a personal connection with as many voters as he could in the riding. This contributed greatly to his victory. That and the convoy, the occupation of Ottawa, that also really was the most important thing. In the riding right now of Battle River Crowfoot, there's this woman running as an independent. I'm calling her Badass Bonnie. She's pretty cool. And she is upset that Pierre Poilievre seems to be, and I agree with her on that, like, he's taking these people in this riding for granted, saying, well, this is the safest conservative riding we could find, so let's go and run there so that Pierre can just quickly get reelected to the House of Commons and go back to Ottawa and just proceed to ignore the people from there. And she's like, first of all, this is costing a small fortune to run a by-election that was not really necessary, because we had a conservative MP, and the guy was now working somewhere else, but still, they expressed their votes, these people, and now they have to vote again and pay for another by-election. Why? Right? Because somebody thinks that they're easy to get, and they'll vote for him just because he's the leader of the party. So she's going, and anyway, she's out there, she's doing all the things that Bruce Vanjoy was doing, and she says that she thinks she can win. And that's what Bruce Vanjoy said. And everybody said, everybody who was serious about this game said, there's no way Pierre Poilievre is going to lose the Carleton riding. The same way they're saying, well, I don't think he's going to lose Battle River Crowfoot, but, well, what if she manages to pull off an upset and then he winds up losing not once, but twice? Anyway, the by-election is in mid-August. I guess as the race develops, we'll start to have perhaps some few numbers for surveys and opinion polls about what the people there think. Clearly, it's up to them to decide, but I'm looking forward to that. And then we have to have a little addendum to this little book and see how to beat Pierre Poilievre twice. Anyway, talk to you later.